Hey there, CineMaster fans. Hope you're ready for some movie magic. Let's dive right in. The film Downsizing begins with a scene in an American laboratory, where we see a scientist conducting tests on mice. Afterwards, he goes to his colleague and tells him, "We succeeded and reached the result we wanted." After some time, a conference is held, and one of the scientists announces that they have found a way to better preserve the planet's environment due to the overpopulation happening in the world. Suddenly, he reveals his colleague, the other scientist, and the shock is that this scientist has become smaller, only a few centimeters tall. He tells them, "This is our new discovery that will change humanity for the coming years, and it will reduce pollution." 10 years after these events, we see Paul, a physical therapist working in a lab. Later, we see him at a restaurant with his friends, and they are following the news of the downsizing project. He returns home and meets his wife, Audrey. The next day, they go to a party with their old school friends. Some of their friends surprise them by revealing that they have become small people. Paul sits with his small friend, who tells him that everything has become better. They live the life of luxury they always dreamed of, and everything is cheaper for their size. Their words influence Paul and Audrey, and they both head to the place where the small people's communities are. There, Paul and Audrey see the luxury life offered to small people. They can buy mansions for very low prices, eat more, produce less waste, and are provided with protection and special benefits. All this convinces Paul and Audrey of the idea. They meet with an employee who tells them that if they sell all their belongings and collect their savings, they will get one of the most luxurious mansions in the city for small people. Paul and Audrey are convinced and start selling all their things. At night, they throw a farewell party because they won't be able to come back after being downsized. During the party, Audrey's father comes and tells her not to go, as he is not convinced by the idea, but he came for her sake. The next day, they go to the city, and the employee begins to ask them if they are fully and mentally ready for the downsizing process, because it is impossible to return to normal size afterward. Audrey starts to show signs of hesitation and stress, but Paul does it to make her happy and to get rid of their accumulated expenses and debts. Then we see them waiting for their turn for the procedure. When they are called, the employee tells them they will be separated during the process and will meet again after 5 hours. Paul says goodbye and goes. Paul is then prepared for the procedure. They shave his hair and eyebrows, extract his teeth, and then he and the others are taken to the downsizing room. They are injected with a substance that shrinks them. The door is closed, and the process begins. When the door opens, everyone, including Paul, is now smaller. Afterwards, they tell Paul that Audrey has a call for him. When he answers, he hears Audrey's voice. She apologizes and says she couldn't go through with it. She couldn't leave her friends and family, so she didn't go through with the procedure and stayed her normal size. Paul tells her that he did all this for her and that she betrayed him, but she says her concern was to make him happy and she forgot herself, so she's sorry. She hangs up, leaving Paul in shock. Paul then goes to the small people's city and arrives at the house he dreamed of living in, but he had hoped to live there with his wife who left him. A year later, Paul signs the divorce papers from Audrey after she requested it. After starting to adapt to the city, Paul gets a new job. He goes to a friend's birthday party, where his friend tells him he needs to start a relationship after his divorce from Audrey. Paul says he already has a date. That night, we see him having dinner with Kristen, the woman he's dating. While they're talking, noise comes from the second floor. Paul says it's his neighbor who parties every day. He goes to ask him to turn down the music. The neighbor, Dusan, comes down and Paul sees a real flower at its normal size and asks where he got it. But Paul ignores the question. Kristen leaves, and it's clear her relationship with Paul isn't good. Paul takes the flower and goes up to Dusan's apartment, where everyone is gathered and the party is full of people. He starts looking around and in an attempt to find meaning, a woman offers him a pill, which is clearly a drug. Paul starts hallucinating and partying wildly until he loses consciousness. The next morning, he wakes up and sees one of the cleaning workers walking strangely. Paul gets up and starts talking to her but keeps focusing on her odd walk. He follows her and catches her stealing medicine from Dusan's house. She says she isn't stealing, she has a sick friend and Dusan allowed her to take what she needs. She leaves, and he tells her he noticed she has a prosthetic leg, which affects her walk and causes her pain. He noticed this due to his profession. He starts helping her and she asks him to help her sick friend, since he has medical experience. She insists he comes with her and he eventually goes. On the way, he realizes they're leaving the small city through a tunnel into the outside world. They meet her Vietnamese friend, who asked him to help her on how to live in this place, which is for adults, but they have turned it into a residential complex for the poor class of small people. And then she showed him her medications. He chooses some medicines for her. She says her friend's husband died and she got worse, eventually developing cancer. She asks him to come another day to fix her prosthetic leg. He does, and when he returns, She tells him her friend has died and nothing could have been done. He tells her not to worry, and he starts fixing her leg. He asks if she misses her village, and she says there is no village. It disappeared and a dam was built in its place. That's why she and her sister protested, and as a result, she was arrested and downsized as punishment. He accidentally breaks her leg, and Paul ends up working in her place. She doesn't receive her new prosthetic leg, and after that, Paul starts helping her with her work and sees her as she takes food from the rich and distributes it to the poor. With his help, Paul discovers the human side inside this girl, whose name is Gun. So they go to Dusan's house to clean it. There Dusan sees Paul in this state, so he asked his help and tells him to get rid of her. They told Inguk that Paul is going to go with us to Norway, because we have work there and we need his help. Inguk says, I always used to deliver messages from Jorgen, and he asks me to come to Norway, because he feels guilty about what happened to me. We learn that Jorgen is the famous scientist who discovered the shrinking process at the beginning of the film. She tells them, I want to go with you to Norway. And indeed, Dusan, his friend Paul, and Inguk set off on a journey to Norway. While they are at sea, they meet Jorgen and his wife, who is named Anne. Jorgen tells them that the world will end because of methane emissions at the South Pole, and human life will end, and it's possible that they are the last remaining human. After that, they arrive at the colony of small-sized people in Norway, which was among regular humans without any wall or cover. There, Jorgen introduces them to some of the villagers. A woman from the village takes them and shows them the basement. Paul asks her why it exists, and she tells him, we built it in case something urgent happens that we can't face. We will hide inside this basement, starting tomorrow, and stay there until things return to normal outside. We might stay there for hundreds of years until things get better. The villagers gather, including Paul, Dusan, and Inguk. Jorgen announces that they will hide in the basement and asks them to prepare. After that, Inguk comes to Paul and says we're ready to go back to our country, and I miss my friends there. He tells her that they are all going to die anyway, and asks her to hide with the rest of the people in the basement. But she refuses and says I could never leave the people I love and go into this hole. She asks Dusan and his friend to convince Paul. The next day, we see Paul enjoying his time with the villagers on their last day before entering the basement. Inguk comes and asks him about his true feelings for her, but Paul doesn't admit anything, remaining focused on the importance of survival and staying alive. Regardless of her feelings toward him, he had another goal. Afterwards, we see them all gathered, watching the last sunset with the villagers. At night, people start entering the basement or tunnel, including Paul. He says goodbye to Dusan and Inguk gives him a Bible, asking him to remember her with it. After that, he enters the tunnel and starts walking. On the other side, Dusan and Inguk stay waiting. Paul remains confused and lost in his thoughts, but then he makes his decision, quickly returns to Dusan and Inguk, apologizes to Inguk, and tells her, I thought about what you said, and I don't want to spend the rest of my life with those people. You asked me before about my feelings, and my feelings are that I love you and want to stay with you. Then they hear the sound of the tunnel door being detonated, so they hide, the door explodes, and they immediately leave. We see them on the plane returning to their country. After that, they go to the place where Inguk used to live, and we see Paul distributing food to the people there, watching them attentively. Paul was affected by Inguk and her humanity, and it turned him into a different person. If you liked the video, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification button so you never miss an updates. See you in the next video.